At the very end of James Joyce's Ulysses, a single line of text grounds the monumental novel in time and space. Trieste, Zurich, Paris, 1914-1921. The years are exact. The writing of this book maps perfectly onto the entire duration of the First World War and its immediate aftermath. While Joyce moved his family from city to city to avoid the conflict, Europe was actively tearing itself apart. Nations were funneling their entire industrial capacities into mechanized slaughter, turning the continent into a factory for artillery shells and trench warfare. Millions of soldiers were dying in the mud for the sake of abstract virtues, chivalry, honor, and a militaristic code that demanded blood sacrifice for the glory of the empire. Against that backdrop of global carnage, Joyce pointed his lens in the exact opposite direction. He focused entirely on a single, thoroughly unremarkable Thursday in Dublin, June 16, 1904. He opens his protagonist's day not with a battle cry, but with the violent sizzle of a raw pork kidney hitting a hot pan. Joyce resolved to write an epic of the human body. By documenting inescapable biological functions, eating, digesting, and even the basic mechanics of breathing, he leveled a direct insult at the sterile, high-minded abstractions that were currently sending young men to the slaughterhouse. Elevating the infinitesimal actions of Leopold Bloom, a quiet, unheroic advertising canvasser, was a calculated political protest. Joyce used the extreme minutiae of an ordinary life as a standing reproach to the massive, destructive machinery of European empires. Because of its dense interior monologues, Ulysses carries a reputation as a chaotic, impenetrable stream of consciousness experiment. It is often assumed the words simply flowed, unfiltered, onto the page. The Stewart-Gilbert schema proves the exact opposite. It is a complex interpretive table that assigns specific Homeric titles, body parts, and academic disciplines to each chapter of the novel. Joyce imposed a severe set of parameters on every single chapter. Before writing a word, he assigned each episode a specific time of day, an organ of the human body, an academic art, and a precise narrative technique. This rigorous scaffolding functions like a systematic engine. By forcing his narrative through these strict, predetermined categories, Joyce built a structure designed to dismantle British imperial psychology and exhaust the English language from the inside out. This rigid system allows the narrative to bypass the sentimental traps of national myth, pushing the Irish experience into a wider international context. Look at the first column of the schema. Joyce maps his chapters directly onto the episodes of Homer's ancient Greek epic, the Odyssey. Telemachus, Nestor, Cyclops. Each mundane Dublin encounter has a classical counterpart. The poet T.S. Eliot argued that Joyce had discovered the mythical method. This method involves manipulating a continuous parallel between contemporaneity and antiquity to give a shape and significance to the immense anarchy of modern life. But Joyce does not use this mythic structure to elevate his Dubliners to the level of gods. He uses it to execute an ironic inversion. If classical epics claim that wars are fought for noble ideals, Joyce scales that grandeur down to the domestic. Helen of Troy wasn't a timeless ideal. She was a runaway wife whose actions caused 10 years of pointless bloodshed. The legendary Odysseus, the warrior king who slaughtered his rivals, is recast here as Mr. Leopold Bloom. Bloom is a middle-aged, cuckolded citizen whose greatest acts of bravery involve feeding stray cats and advocating against the use of firearms. The application of Greek myth serves to humble the epic hero. By making the ancient analogues human and flawed, Joyce exposes the squalor of chivalric militarism, proving that the whole structure of ancient heroism was a lie. This rejection of warfare was highly specific to the political climate of 1904 Dublin. Ireland, still under British rule, was desperately searching for a distinct national identity. The Irish literary revival tried to build that identity on the militaristic Cuchulainn cult. They resurrected the ancient Gaelic warrior who died strapped to a rock, using his legend to inspire a modern doctrine of nationalist blood sacrifice and armed rebellion. Joyce absolutely refused to use this native myth for his novel's framework. He abandoned Gaelic classes and openly mocked the literary revival's obsession with local warriors. He recognized that the nationalist obsession with martial heroism was a trap. To Joyce, the fighting Irish rebel was a covert imitation of the very British imperial machismo the nationalists claimed to be fighting against. It was the exact same muscular militarism wrapped in a green flag. This is why he chose a reluctant Greek traveler over a bellicose Gaelic fighter to represent his protagonist. Odysseus didn't even want to go to Troy. He knew the war was a pretext for merchants seeking new markets. Rejecting the native warrior epic was a necessary step. Joyce had to shock his compatriots out of their violent self-deceptions if he was ever going to forge a truly uncolonized conscience. The true subversive mechanics are hidden in the biological and stylistic parameters. By tethering almost every chapter to a literal piece of anatomy, the lungs, esophagus, bowels, Joyce forces the reader back to the physical reality of human existence. Abstract patriotic pretensions fail when the narrative is governed by the digestive tract. But the biological framework is paired with the linguistic one. By successfully parodying all of them, he delivers a technical proof. Every celebrated literary style is merely an artificial convention. No matter how grand the prose, it leaves massive human reality unsaid. By saturating the text with these parodies, Joyce proves that no single style can capture the whole truth. This tactical destruction of written convention effectively silences the formal English tradition to make room for the raw, unpunctuated oral flood that closes the book. British colonialism enforced a rigid binary, the imperial mind as masculine and rational, projecting the feminine and emotional onto the Irish. Leopold Bloom shatters this. Defined by empathy, he cooks his wife's breakfast, imagines the pain of childbirth, and exhibits womanly traits. Joyce presents the womanly man as a more complete version of humanity. He is an individual who has moved beyond the restricted roles and narrow identities assigned by an occupying culture. Because of this, Bloom is isolated. The hyper-masculine, pub-dwelling men of Dublin treat him with deep suspicion, viewing his empathy and passivity as freakish deviations from the martial ideal. Bloom represents a shift from filiation to affiliation. In literary theory, filiation refers to inherited identity based on biological heritage, while affiliation refers to an identity built through chosen social and intellectual connections. Embracing this androgynous multiplicity is the ultimate act of post-colonial rebellion. By containing both halves of the human experience, Bloom effortlessly rejects the either-or logic of the British Empire, rendering their psychological categories entirely obsolete. We return to the master schema for the novel's final structural deconstruction: the Homeric parallels, the academic arts, the precise symbols. These were merely temporary scaffolding. Like any construction project, the framework was meant to be discarded once the building was complete. When the mythic armor falls away, it reveals the unadorned core of Joyce's methodology. All that remains is the literal human body, moving relentlessly through linear time. Joyce didn't build this intricate system to worship antiquity. He weaponized the literary and historical frameworks of the past, specifically to defeat the imperial, militaristic systems of his present. In the bloody wake of the First World War, Ulysses redefined what it meant to be a hero. It wasn't about inflicting violence, about conquering territory, or bleeding for a flag. The ultimate heroic act is the mental endurance required to simply exist. It is the quiet courage to live an entirely ordinary day, in full androgynous command of one's multifaceted humanity.